It was a peaceful summer morning in early June 2010, the kind of quiet dawn that makes every whisper, every footstep, every bird call feel sacred. A man called Derrick Bird, a familiar face in his village, a grandfather, a taxi driver, pulled up to the home of his twin brother. None of the neighbors suspected what followed. Moments later, Derrick fired point blank into his brother's life. 11 times. That single act shattered everything. A man loved by many, Birdie, as friends called him, had become unrecognizable. What followed wasn't random. At first, Derrick drove with precision. He stopped at the home of the family solicitor, a man he trusted. He shot him too. Then, with cold efficiency, he headed to a taxi rank in Whitehaven. There he saw a rival, a fellow driver, a begrudged relationship, a wild life of old resentments. Derrick called him over and killed him. 3 dead. But the calm had unraveled fully by now. Panic rippled through towns. The winding roads of Cumbria, usually safe and slow, became a nightmare path from one horror to the next. At a distance, passers-by ran for cover. He moved on, lobbing shots into the faces of strangers, walking shoppers, a cyclist, an elderly couple. Some were picked deliberately, others met him by cruel chance. In one moment, a smile in the sun. Next, a scream. A warped crescendo of hatred, confusion, loss. Communities scattered in terror. One local said later that even being inside school buildings became a task of bravery. Teachers and students huddled, doors locked, hearts pounding. And when it was over, after the sirens and shouts and the frantic manhunt, Derrick Bird was gone too. Not captured, not stopped. He took himself into a nearby wood and ended his life there. The manhunt, the lives lost, the grief. It all ended as suddenly as it had begun. In the inquest that followed, investigators tried to piece together motive. They unearthed a mountain of stress, tax troubles involving a hidden £60,000 savings, fear of prison, accusations of betrayal from people he adored, his brother and solicitor. He believed they were turning against him, a collision of paranoia and pride. His own son said Derrick told him the night before, "I'm going to prison." That phrase echoed like prophecy. Still, friends and family refused to believe evil had always lived in him. They called him a gentle soul, a man who frequented his local pub for a pint and a chat, who loved scuba diving, who had recently become a grandfather and promised the world to his new grandson. The countryside, so often quiet and safe, was irreversibly changed. Flowers bloomed in the streets, punctuated by memorials, candles, notes, tears. The Prime Minister and royalty came to show respect, but the silence that followed was deafening. How does a man go from gentle neighbor to a killer in a matter of hours? How does fear twist love into a weapon? These questions still echo in West Cumbria's hills. Derrick Bird's dark journey stands as a stark reminder that sometimes the calmest faces can harbor storms we never see until the sky breaks. Thanksgiving weekend, 2009. Typically a time for gratitude, turkey, and laughter with loved ones. But in the quiet town of Burlingame, Kansas, this holiday would be remembered for forever altering lives. A man called Kraig Kahler, once a respected utilities director, a father with a 10-year-old son, a husband now estranged, stood at the threshold of what should have been a family gathering at his mother-in-law's home. Instead, it became the setting for a nightmare none of them could foresee. He walked inside with a rifle in his hands. One by one, he killed his wife, Karen, their teenage daughters, Emily and Lauren, and Dorothy, Karen's grandmother. Quiet souls fractured by sudden, unimaginable violence. His son, Sean, was in the house too, and he who owned the last moments before chaos turned deadly, who cleaned coins with his mother at the sink, witnessed the horror unfold. When Sean fled the house, terror fueling his legs, he ran, not back to safety, but out into the night, determined to find help. That innocent, brave child carried the silence of that home on his shoulders the rest of his life. Neighbors heard the shots. A couple peeked from a window, saw a man with a gun, and felt fear grip their chest. A deputy arrived, forced his way into that scene of devastation, and found Lauren, her voice trembling, desperate. "Don't let me die!" He cradled her until help could come. Emily lay still in the living room. Dorothy, already gone, slumped in a chair. Then silence, except for the echo of gunfire and the boy's desperate footsteps. In the courtroom months later, Sean testified by video. Clear voice, crushed heart. "My dad came through the door and shot my mom." He told how he ducked behind counters, glimpsed his father again, and fled. The trial that followed was a battle not just of facts, but of motivations. The defense argued Kraig had snapped, his emotional world unraveling after losing his job, grappling with divorce, and his wife's new relationship with another woman. They painted him as mentally broken, under unbearable stress. But the prosecution wove a different picture. A man who moved methodically, room to room, targeting each woman as he went. A killer who spared his son, not punishment, but chilling choice. The jury deliberated. They weighed a life and a death. In less than a day, they spoke. Guilty. And they recommended the death penalty, saying the killings were too cold, too cruel, too deliberate. Outside the courtroom, Karen's sister spoke for the family. "The verdict doesn't bring our family back. The cloud of loss still hangs over us." In the years that followed, Kraig appealed, even reaching the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing his mental health meant the state shouldn't execute him. But the law stood firm. Through it all, one image haunts Sean, the boy who escaped, carrying grief and strength that no child should ever bear. It began with a visit, ordinary, unremarkable, yet destined to become the darkest weekend in a family's history. It was February 1996 in San Diego County, California, when a 15-year-old boy named Joshua Jenkins stepped into his grandparents' upscale condo, wanting nothing more than a normal family weekend. But beneath that polite smile, something was already unraveling. Inside that quiet home, Joshua's adoptive parents, his mother and father, and his grandparents, lay vulnerable. That night, after an argument with his mother, Joshua grabbed a hammer. In the stillness, the first blow struck. One by one, grandparents, parents, each was beaten and stabbed in brutal silence. Fear and love collided, forever silencing voices that mattered most. The horror didn't end there. Somehow the boy managed to hide the carnage from his 10-year-old sister, Megan, who slept oblivious. The next morning, Joshua told her they'd run an errand together. He led her to buy an axe. When they returned, the tool he casually carried became a weapon again, inside that same home where safety should have belonged, in Joshua's hands, directed at Megan. And then, as if obeying a script only he could read, Joshua torched their family's condo to erase the horrors inside. He fled the scene in the family car, leaving behind cries and memories turned flames and ash. It wasn't long before law enforcement closed in. He was found the next day at a convenience store, his words cold and distant, his silence louder than any scream. As the trial approached, experts wrestled with his mind. Some diagnosed schizophrenia. Some called him legally insane. Others said, no, this was a young man consumed by revenge, enraged at being sent to a boarding school for troubled youths, furious at his parents for removing him from what he knew and loved. Murky truths and painful truths collided in court. In April 1997, on the eve of trial, Joshua changed his plea to guilty, an unusual move that let no one escape the reality of what he had done. And 5 months later, the jury decided he was sane. Every blow, every flame, every snuffed-out heartbeat had been deliberate. When the judge finally spoke, the verdict was chilling in its clarity. 112 years in prison without parole. No forgiveness. No release. A lifetime to weigh the weight of moments lost, of trust shattered beyond repair. Think of the faces behind this story. Grandparents whose wisdom once guided a boy. Parents whose love was meant to nurture him. A sister whose innocence was entangled and extinguished in a nightmare she never saw coming. And what of Joshua? A youth whose choice shattered every definition of normal. The boy who perhaps felt abandoned instead became the author of a family's end. In the end, all that remained was a scorched home and a sentence that echoed like a judgment on every unspoken fear. Sometimes, rage isn't sudden. It's a slow fuse under a quiet look. And when it finally burns, the sound is something no family can recover from.